Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining us, we are asking that you use the chat box and go ahead and pop your name in, as well as where you're joining us from. We also ask that you please keep yourself on mute today. The team will be going in and popping you on mute if it happens to come off throughout the session. We just have a large number of participants on the call today. We'll just ask that you mute yourself if you can, please. But love hearing where everyone's coming from. Lots of New Zealand, Melbourne, all over, Sydney, Auckland. Thanks for joining us, everyone. All right. Now, we do have a fair bit to cover today, so I'm going to really try and keep us to time. My name is Meredith Epp. I'm the Industry Partnership Manager here at APCO. And I'll just run through quickly a little bit of what we'll be doing today and how to use Zoom. So obviously, headphones or earphones are helpful for clarity. You can keep your microphone muted. Put your full name in the chat box if you can, and then use the chat box if you have any questions as we go throughout. At the end of the session, we'll have time for discussion and Q&A for all the different speakers at the end. But again, just use mute, use chat. If you have any technical issues, you can flag that with one of the APCO team members, so Joe Holman or Alison Appleby. Also, feel free to use reactions, so if you want to give anything a thumbs up or a clap, please go ahead and do that. And also, this session will be recorded today, and so that we can make that available to those who weren't able to attend, and that'll be available in the coming weeks. So thank you all again so much for joining us. And I'll go ahead and hand over to Brooke to give a little bit of a welcome and introduction to us all.
Okay, so I guess it's my part to play is to big kia ora to all of our New Zealand colleagues and friends who are joining us. Meredith just mentioned a few places that she saw there, and I just saw somebody from sunny Hawke's Bay, which sounds quite delightful considering it's rather grey out there today here in Sydney. But it's wonderful to see everyone from New Zealand joining us, but also from outside of Australia and New Zealand. We've got some people joining us from the UK and other parts of the world. So whichever part of the world it is that you are joining us from today, as we're all in different locations, I would like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of whichever particular piece of land that you are resting upon at this point, and recognise and respect the elders past, present and emerging. So we have a full packed session for you today to talk about sustainable packaging, and we have the wonderful Kate from Better Packaging Company joining us, and she's going to talk about their initiative that they're working through there in New Zealand. And I think that's a great example of the innovation and the creativity and the sustainability approach that's happening in New Zealand, and an exciting conversation to be having. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about for those of you who don't know what APCO is or what we do, who we are, what our approach is, and then we're going to have a conversation about two of the programs that we think are really interesting and that have a great deal of alignment between Australia and New Zealand. And we're going to have a chat about that. So that's the ARL program, which is the Australasian Recycling Label program, and also the Plastics Pact, a piece of work that we have been working together with in collaboration with EMF and RAP for some time now. But I won't give away the whole story, and I'll wait and we can talk through that as we go through the slides. So there will be an opportunity at the end of this discussion to have some questions, and the team will coordinate those, and both myself, Kate, Anthony Peyton and Lily Barnett, who will also be speaking throughout this session, will be available to answer your questions. There is some technical elements in terms of the ARL program, especially around things like the prep tool. So Anthony's going to give you a demonstration of that today. If we don't get to all your questions today around particularly in regards to the prep tool, just a heads up that we do have a deep dive session on prep scheduled for May the 13th. So if you're able to join us and would like to know more about prep, you can do so at that point as well. So that is the the agenda for today. So Meredith, if we just move on, I'll just tell you a little bit about APCO ourselves. So for those of you who don't know APCO, the organisation is the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation. We're a non-profit organisation. So we are responsible for the sustainable pathways for packaging in Australia. And we are required to work across all the material streams, so glass, plastic, paper, and metal. And we are part of a regulatory framework that we help coordinate, and therefore we are accountable to all the environment ministers in Australia, including state, territory and federal. And at this point, over 1,500 organisations work with APCO to coordinate that work, and they represent over 153 different ANZIC codes. So it's a very big and a very diverse network and community of practice that we have through APCO, and we have long had an association with New Zealand through our members. Most and a great percentage of our members have either sell product into New Zealand or have subsidiary businesses or distribution in New Zealand. So there's always been an interest in promoting a trans-Tasman approach in some of the work that we do. And we are here today to have a chat about how that could look and some of the things that we've been progressing that may be of interest and maybe something that you might like to have further discussions about in terms of sustainable packaging. Having said all of that, I will hand over to Kate from the Better Packaging Company, who is based in New Zealand and is going to tell you all about their initiative and some of the work that they're doing here in New Zealand. So, Kate, if you'd like to step on up.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's incredibly, I don't know what the right word is, perhaps heartening, but I feel extremely strongly that the kind of change that we're wanting to make with the Better Packaging Company in terms of moving towards a sustainable future for packaging is only possible if we work together. There is absolutely no way one company or one organisation can do this alone. If you think about labelling, collection networks, recycling networks, they're all things that will only ever happen and only ever work at scale. So thank you very much. This is a fantastic opportunity for us. Being in the industry, I'm sure you're all aware and possibly completely and utterly sick of hearing the statistics around packaging waste. But you may not be quite so aware of the stats for e-commerce and its packaging in particular. The growth in e-commerce, and I don't think I'm over-exaggerating here by saying that it is stratospheric, and it's certainly not going anywhere. As a society, we're purchasing more and more online. And recent events, I am talking about coronavirus already, have only served to accelerate that shift. You know, I think there are products that we never considered buying online before. We have in the past 4 or 5 weeks done so. And then there are also segments of the population who just were reluctant to purchase online, but have almost been forced by recent events to do so. You know, and when you think about it, every tooth whitening kit, every Jamie Oliver cookbook, every vape refill, you name it, is packaged individually to be sent to the recipient. And more often than not, it'll be sent in at least one layer of single-use plastic. Cardboard is popular, but poly mailers make up 40% of the total e-commerce packaging market, and they are by far the fastest growing segment within that. So that's where we sit, and it was statistics like this and our experience working sort of within e-commerce, within I guess the back end of e-commerce, that led my co-founder Rebecca Bukowski and I, who is also on this call, to our mission, and that's to create a more sustainable future by reducing the environmental impact of packaging. And our focus is on e-commerce packaging in particular. And it was when Bex, bless her, asked, you know, could there be a more sustainable courier satchel, that our journey began. So 18 months and a heap of R&D later, we launched the Better Packaging Company. And I think it's really important to note here that we didn't set out to produce a home compostable satchel, although that is where we ended up. We set out to produce something better than the status quo. than what was currently available. And that mission to find better solutions is ingrained in our company. We believe that our products are the most sustainable options currently available, and this is important given the current state of the recycling industry. And I'm more than happy to chat to anyone after this about some of the, go into more depth on our rationale for our thinking around that. So it was just over 2 years ago that we began selling our real dirt bags, our home compostable courier satchels. And we were the first company to produce them on any scale. We made them matte black with incredibly powerful messaging, and the uptake was phenomenal. Our first production run sold out in just 2 weeks, so we doubled it. That sold out within within weeks again, and we've sort of been running pretty hard ever since. We've now sold literally millions and millions of courier satchels. We have warehousing and distribution all around the world in 5 global locations. We have 7 product lines. We are now the largest global supplier of compostable packaging for e-commerce, and we find that pretty darn exciting. These days we have some of the world's most iconic brands using our packaging. This is a slightly New Zealand-centric selection for you, but they range from global brands like L'Oreal, Billabong, to small Etsy or Trade Me sellers that you've probably never even heard of. But across the board, what we've found is that brands are desperate for ways to improve the sustainability of their supply chains. And I think we've been successful because we've made it super, super easy for them. Our products are a direct replacement, if you like, for what they're currently using more often than not. So there's no change in processes, just a whole lot less guilt, which has been very, very well received. So from day dot, Bex and I have been driven by the belief, and you may have heard this before, but that waste is a design flaw. That waste can be designed out of a system, out of products. And for that reason, all our packaging is designed to be used at least once. Our largest courier satchels have 2 seals and also have this cut line that you can see just on the left-hand picture. And it might seem like something really simple, but adding something this simple to a piece of packaging has, we believe, increased reuse rates for it by over 50%. It just sows an idea in the mind of the recipient. It's like, oh yeah, I could use this again if I don't just, rip into it, but actually grab a pair of scissors and cut into it a bit more carefully. We also play matchmaker fairly regularly. We team some of our large e-commerce merchants who get a lot of returns. So this is particularly in the fashion industry. And we team them up with mushroom farmers, for example, who can use old satchels to grow mushrooms. They're a fantastic sporing ground, apparently. We have other growers using them to line garden beds, planter boxes, or as weed matting. Florists are even using them for bouquets, as bouquet wrap. And look, if you really wanted to get creative, you could cut some holes in them and pop your arms through, and it could protect you on a rainy day. That's Bex and I down in the right-hand corner being complete idiots at one stage. Our packaging has always been designed to be reused, but from the very beginning, we felt that wasn't quite enough. And from day dot, we've been determined to develop a reusable courier satchel, one that could be used many, many times. But we were also, as we're prone to do, determined to do it properly and responsibly. And so for us, we've called this initiative SWAP, which stands for the Sustainable Way of Posting. And this is a range of durable courier packaging designed to be used many, many times. And the ultimate goal for us is actually for them to be receptacles to facilitate even more recycling. So if you can imagine, once a package has been received by the person who's bought, say, for example, a t-shirt, they could then use it to send back old used clothes. that could then be distributed to people who need them. In fact, we have a large fashion brand in the US who is going to do just that. But it could just as easily be toothpaste tubes, toothbrushes, or even soft plastics that were put back into these packages to be sent back, the contents removed, recycled, the package then refurbished, and the cycle goes round again. It has taken us 2 years to get to this point, the point at which we are ready to trial, because first and foremost, it's been super hard to find the right material to make these out of, and I'll go into that in a second. But we also didn't think that brands and companies were necessarily ready back then. And, I spoke before about how we've made it really, really easy for companies to move to more sustainable packaging. This concept requires a change in processes. So it's not going to be quite as easy, but if you think about where we are now, we have a customer base of thousands and thousands of sustainably minded e-commerce merchants who implicitly trust us and our products. They have bought into our vision, they share our values, and they really are on the journey with us. They direct our product development, they give us feedback into what and how and which products we're going to make next, and they're very much part of that process for us. If we had launched Swap straight off the bat 2 years ago, we believe the uptake would have been far more limited than what it will be now. Now we've got the opportunity to give it some real momentum and scale, and we believe that's what it really deserves. So what do you make packaging like this out of? It's taken us so long because, I mentioned we wanted to do this properly, and the material has to be sustainably sourced and produced. It has to be tough enough to last many postal trips, and at end of life, it has to be able to be recycled. Those are they're self-imposed criteria, but they are the criteria that we've given it. And in terms of its design, the packaging itself has to be reusable. It has to be sealed and unsealed multiple times. Labels have to stick well enough during delivery, but also able to be peeled off and made ready for reuse again. And it has to be tamper-proof. You have to be able to tell if it's been opened. So you can imagine trying to get all those ducks aligned or in a row has been no easy feat. That said, ours won't be the first reusable courier satchel in the world, but we do believe it'll be the best. There are others that we think are actually over-engineered. If you consider a model in which just 1 in 10 is not returned, and our research suggests that would be a really optimistic return rate for this kind of packaging, then on average, each swap will only have to do 9 trips, right? So making it out of heavy-duty PP and Velcro, for example, something that's designed to last 100 trips, makes no sense. In fact, it's a waste, and we don't do waste. It would also be fairly heavy, and when it comes to post, weight and the associated fuel consumption is imperative. There's another model in the US that uses zips and plastic ties for security. Neither of those are recyclable, so we'd rather not go down that route either. So the design challenge has been to find a material that ticks all those boxes, that is durable enough but not too durable, and is also functional. And it's not been easy, but we're finally there. And as soon as this corona cloud passes, we're ready to begin trials here in New Zealand. We're certainly not promising that it will be perfect, but it will certainly be better. And that's what we're all about. Thanks, team.
Thank you, Kate. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure everyone has lots of questions for Kate. If you can, feel free to pop them in the chat now, but we'll get to those at the end of the session as well. All right, so I'll hand back over to Brooke now to talk to us a little bit about the collective impact and circular economy for packaging.
Hi everyone. So when wanting to talk about sustainable packaging, one of the things we wanted to explain to you was the approach that we take and the work that we do. So the Australian Packaging Covenant, which I mentioned earlier on, the regulatory framework itself has been around for many, many years. But it's only in the last 3 to 4 years that we have made we had a new mandate for the work that we were doing, which was to transition Australia to a circular economic approach for packaging. No small feat, and quite a difficult thing to translate from a strategic context to an operational one in the context of what is my job in that and what's your job and how does it all kind of work together. What we very quickly realised in doing that work and having to design a way strategically to address this work was we all have a shared problem. We all like to think we're unique and special, and we all are in our own way, but there are very many common elements to the issues that we have in the area of packaging, not only in Australia and New Zealand, but globally. And those kind of shared issues and that shared problem requires a shared solution. And when you try to understand then how do you coordinate the work to resolve that and deliver on that shared solution, we decided that the work would be best delivered through the collective impact model. So those of you who aren't familiar with that work, we are really talking about focusing on 5 key areas. The first one is a common agenda, so understanding a common language and working through that. For Australia, that is the national packaging targets. So the common agenda we have is there's a series of targets, but the overarching target is that 100% of all packaging will be recyclable, reusable or compostable by 2025. It's nice, it's easy, it's clear, it's a light on the hill. We can all get behind and work towards that, and that's our common agenda. The important thing then is to have a backbone organisation that can coordinate that activity, and that is what APCO does. We're not here to do all the work. We can't do all the work. To Kate's earlier point, this is the most important thing to recognise. We have a systemic issue and a systemic problem that requires everybody to do a little bit to resolve those issues, and that means somebody or some kind of organisation needs to help coordinate all of that, and that's where APCO comes in, and that's the work that we do. So we are the backbone, helping the arms and legs all move about and effectively engineer the work together to strategically achieve that common agenda. The third area is around mutually reinforcing activities, and that is to make sure that there's always 100 ways in which you can cut the cake, and it's great. You need to have consistency and in terms of your approach, but you also need to, not everybody can do everything, and so you need lots of different people doing different things, but they need to reinforce that common agenda, and that's really important and comes into the last 2 areas that are important in collective impact, which is continuous communication, really talking about and understanding what everyone's doing, having that common agenda, understanding how to deliver on it, and then measuring those results consistently so that we can all understand how progress is being made and where things may need to be tweaked or changed or addressed or slightly modified. So in terms of collective impact, they're the key areas that when we're trying to deliver on something like sustainable packaging, that we're looking to work on strategically. What that means in terms of the next slide, which is about the circular economy, is very much where the circular economy is from a global perspective. This infographic that you see here is not unique to Australia or New Zealand. Essentially, globally, most of the world is in the linear to recycling economy space. So, and looking to improve the efficiency in their recycling economy and working towards the end game, which is the circular economy, which, as we all know, is where we shift things from being waste to being a resource and maximise the utilisation of those materials to ensure that we tread a lot lighter on this planet that we all live on. So the circular economy transition is important in the work that we do. We do that through collective impact, and we've only just recently, if we move to the next slide, in our packaging, we have released this document which is called Our Packaging Future. Now, Our Packaging Future is an overarching strategic piece of work which shows you how to deliver on that common agenda. And when we talk about sustainable packaging, we have developed a vision for what that would look like. And what's really important is this is the vision of over 200 contributors. So it took 2 years and over 200 people working on this piece of work to get to this stage, to have this collective impact framework that shows us how to deliver on the circular economy for packaging in Australia. And that vision is about that the whole packaging value chain will collaborate to keep packaging materials out of landfill and maximise the circular value of the materials, energy and labour within the local economy. So it's a big mandate, it's a big vision, but it's important to have that vision and to all understand where we're going and how we're going to get there, which is the next bit. So what we did once we had established the vision was then to understand, well, what are the key areas that we need to work on? I mean, if you can cut something 100 different ways, well, which way are you going to cut it? And so we focused on 3 key outcomes. The first one being that packaging is designed for circularity. And that means that it is designed to meet those targets that you see on the right-hand side there. So if you look at this infographic, the outcome that we're looking to achieve here is packaging designed for circularity. And we look to do that through a couple of key strategies. For example, reducing packaging through design and innovation, phasing out problematic and unnecessary single-use plastic packaging, increasing the proportion of reusable packaging. That's a really key area where, you know, Kate mentioned about, you know, people even just thinking about reusability, and it's such an important point because quite often people aren't even pushing their mind to think conceptually about reuse, and it's a really important alternative in the space that we work. It's also about designing for material recycling and design for compostability where appropriate. There is always, you know, there's always a hierarchy of choices to make around materiality, and you know, obviously the first and the highest order priority is to, where possible, don't do that. Avoid and reduce packaging wherever you can. You know, that's our first and foremost, our highest priority here. So if we don't need it, don't do it. And then, you know, coming down in that hierarchy, we're then looking at reuse, recycling and compostability. So it's nice to have that view of how that hierarchy works, and that's really important when you're thinking about designing for circularity. You know, that first thing is, well, do we really need to do what we're doing? And sometimes reuse is a good way to think about, and to one of Kate's slides there about, you know, things being more durable. Sometimes it's not about lightweighting something, it's about making it more durable so that it can be part of a reuse system as well. The second outcome, if we move to the next slide, is outcome 2, which is about improved collection and recycling systems. So you know, the challenges that we have in Australia are very similar to the challenges you have in New Zealand around, you know, curbside and collection of materials, etc. So what we're looking to do here through this outcome is really improve those collection and recycling systems and make sure we have the most efficient and effective ones that are possible, and we look to do that by addressing some strategies. The first one around standardising curbside collection systems, expanding the drop-off and take-back systems for packaging. So that's looking beyond curbside, really starting to work through the elements of closed loop programs and other collection programs, such as I know in New Zealand you're starting to work on your container deposit scheme model. Obviously we have that rolling out in various stages across Australia now and have done for some years. So looking at what are the best you know, models and ways in which to deliver those kind of closed loop systems that operate outside of the curbside system. Improving the infrastructure for sortation and recycling. Most countries around the world need to upskill and upscale their infrastructure and capability in that space, and I think, well, I know Australia definitely and New Zealand are not unique to that that need either. And the third one is really important. It's about educating households and businesses to source separate effectively. We'll talk about the ARL program a little bit later, and that's where this becomes really important. The earliest intervention anyone can make in the system is when you're standing at the bin, which bin are you going to put it in? And, you know, what kind of information and guidance and education are we giving to people to make that choice effectively? So it's a really important strategy within the overall outcome that we're looking to achieve here. So there's a third outcome, if we move to the next slide, which is expanded markets for youth packaging. This is a really, really important area. We've just, in Australia, come out with some new recycled content targets that we've been working on in the last year or so, and that's really important because these materials need to have a home. To transition effectively to a circular economy, materials must have a value. They must be sustainable in an economic model. To do that, we really need to expand out the markets for youth packaging. We are focusing on two key strategies in that space, increasing recycled content and packaging, and also increasing the use of recycled packaging materials in other products and civil construction. The reality is you can't go bottle to bottle all the time. You know, it's a nirvana state and what we all aspire to be, but the reality is that materials are collected and sorted in different ways, and we will have different outcomes for those materials. So having these two strategies addresses all of those options. But when we are talking about sustainable packaging, if we move to the next slide, we can see that transition to the circular economy. I appreciate this is a big infographic, so I'm not going to go through all of it. But it's really important because what it is doing is it's actually showing us what is our current state and what is the future state that we're looking for. And so this is really important. If you look across those coloured boxes across the top there, that's a packaging value chain. So that's all the elements that make up that whole system that we're looking to address. And what we have done is looked at that and gone, okay, well, where are we right now? What's the state of play? You know, and if you look at something like, you know, packaging production, for an example, some formats and materials are not recyclable or generate negative impacts, such as litter. What in our packaging future and the ideal state for the circular economy transition is that all packaging formats would actually be designed and for either reuse or recycling or eliminated through system innovations. So it's really about being quite clear, acknowledging where we're at, the work that we have to do, but what's the end game and where we're going through. And we'll share all these slides with you after this session. So I think it's really interesting, and we'll also share our packaging future with you to think through those different stages within the packaging value chain and where we are and where we need to go in terms of really making that transition to the circular economy. And you know, in regard to that, obviously the sustainable packaging pathways as well. So that's where we are in terms of sustainable packaging. That's the approach that we're working to. I have personally worked a lot in New Zealand over the last couple of years, and you know, I know some of my colleagues and some of the people that have been generous of their time are on the line now, and you know, including Sharon Humphreys and Lynn Mays and Adele Rose and Rachel Barker and Rob from the Packaging Forum, and our colleagues from Auckland City Council and from Waste Mins, Janine, who is also on the line. And we know there's much alignment between what we're doing in Australia and what we're doing in New Zealand. And the work of APCO is such that we are a collaborative organisation that works with other partners to deliver on that work. And you'll see that through the ARL program and what that actually means in a very tangible way when we shift to that in a moment. But I really wanted to acknowledge those people that I've just mentioned. You know, they've given a great deal of time to me, and we've spent time over the last couple of years really working through how we could support each other, because we are neighbours, and there's definitely a trans-Tasman benefit to working together. And we're an organisation that works collaboratively, and we know the only way to resolve this problem is to actually share the burden of the work and to share the knowledge and work collectively together. And so we're really keen to, if we have something that is useful and something that can apply to your work and that you think would be helpful, and we'll tell you more about how the ARL program works and the Pact program work in a moment, and get you to see if that might be something that might be helpful to what you're trying to achieve in your own circular economy transition. However, what we're going to do right now is move on to the ARL program. And we're very lucky to have the wonderful Lily Barnett, who is a program manager in APCO, join us. And Lily has been involved in the program for many years and working on it. And she leads up the technical aspects of our technical advisory committee. But the important thing to note about the ARL program, so the ARL program was launched in 2018. It's been available in Australia and New Zealand since that time. What is important is that it's evidence-based. So we had a requirement to introduce a labelling program in Australia. And what we wanted to make sure was that we had one that consumers and industry could trust. And the only way to do that was to make it transparent and to make it evidence-based. And that's why there is two components to the labelling program. There is the prep tool, which is about assessing packaging formats to make sure that they are recyclable or not, and clearly identifying that to a packaging designer. And the other element is the communication to consumers about which bin to put that in, and that's what you actually see on the label. You can have a label and you can put something on a packaging format, but I can assure you, as the individual responsible for running a national labelling program, it's a very big piece of work to manage from the complexity of it. It requires a great deal of governance. If you're going to do it properly, you need, it's an ongoing live system that needs constant management and monitoring, and we've been very fortunate to establish two key advisory groups that Lily will talk to you a little bit more about, and we have representatives from both Australia and New Zealand who sit on both of those groups, so we're very fortunate to have that trans-Tasman view of the packaging material flows in Australia and New Zealand to be able to make the program valid and worthwhile in both Australia and New Zealand. So I'm going to hand over to Lily, who will walk you through some of the details of the ARL program, and then we will move, and Lily will hand over to Anthony, who will walk you through the prep program itself, the platform, and how that works as well. And that will give you a sense of how the program works. And as I mentioned, you know, there is a further webinar on May the 13th on, which is a deep dive for prep if you don't get all the answers that you're looking for today. We will try to answer as many as we can, but let's move on and get Lily to talk to you all about the ARL program.
Thank you very much, Brooke. So as we said, a program of this size that we're working towards can't be delivered alone. So that's why in 2018, APCO had partnered with the two organisations there that you can see on your screen, and why we have developed those two advisory committees to make this program possible. So our first partner there is Planet Ark on the sort of left-hand side of your screen there. They are a well-known non-for-profit environmental organisation in Australia. They own the trademark of the ARL, and they have a really strong reputation with consumers. So this meant that they really were the perfect partner for us to be able to help drive the delivery of a really unique characteristic of our labelling program, which is the fact that it has a whole national consumer education campaign to follow up with that. So it really is a key component to help support that education and awareness of the ARL. Our second partnership there is with Prep Design, more on the right-hand side of your screen there. And as Brooke said, we have the lovely Anthony with us, who's going to talk you through how this tool works in a bit more detail. But Prep Design developed the packaging recyclability evaluation portal. So that is a one-of-a-kind tool. It enables brands, packaging manufacturers, designers, they input their packaging specifications and they can understand if that's recyclable through curbside in both Australia and New Zealand. And then APCO, we play the role as the backbone organisation, as we mentioned before. Our delivery of this program to brands is really that we help administer the program, so it's making sure that it's going to the right organisations. we're tracking that progress. It's a part of being a part of the program. You let us know how many labels are out in the market. That enables us to understand how much impact, and we can track that progress as well. We also ensure the compliance of the use of PrEP and the application of the ARL itself, and that's completed through annual audits and all of that work as well. So this governance is really integral to the program, as the essence of the ARL, as Brooke mentioned before, is it is evidence-based, so it is a trusted label, and then it's really consistent when it's put on pack. So it's constantly monitored, and so that accuracy and consistency is really key to our goals here. So we're really thankful for the contribution of our 2 advisory committees. I could see before there was some online. So these are really vital to providing that transparency and that legitimacy of the program. It's ensuring that we as industry and as government are working collectively on a program that is filling a much needed gap in the packaging recyclability information market. So these groups are comprised of representation. We have industry experts, we have brands, we have packaging manufacturers, retailers. We also have the waste and recycling sector involved, as well as governments. And as Brooke mentioned, that includes Australia and New Zealand representation as well. Our technical advisory committee is comprised of, as we said, those experts, and you can see them on your screen there. Their role is to constantly review the data that is in PrEP to make sure that it's reflective of our current market, both in Australia and in New Zealand. So this is definitely no small feat. This is a really big job for this group to get through. And so it includes them looking at our council data. So when you're at home, what your council does and doesn't accept in your curbside bin. We also then look at how the weight, dimensions, type of material of that piece of packaging and all of its different components, if that can be correctly resorted into the right material stream. So at a material recovery facility, when that's flying around in that big machinery, if it ends up in the right stream, that's that level of detail that we go to as well. And then finally, we also look at when it ends up in the right bale, and it is the right material, that it can actually be reprocessed into a new material or back into packaging is the ultimate goal there. So yeah, no small feat. It's a hard job for the TAC, and we thank them very much for all of their work. Then if we move on to the Marketing Advisory Committee, our Marketing Advisory Committee supports the strategy and the implementation, as we said before, of our national consumer education campaign. So this is really seeking to drive the consumer awareness and behaviour change in recycling. So this includes that strategy and implementation plan, and also leveraging all of the networks that make sure that we really are educating industry. And this includes all of the councils as well, and then all the way through to consumers. So making sure that we're educating and using the same language and constantly referencing back to that ARL, but making sure that it's not only just coming from APCO or Planet Arc, but these brands are really communicating it out to their customers as well. They're going to all this hard work of putting a label on pack, so it's about getting everyone to be a part of that communication too. So both of these groups meet regularly throughout the year, and ultimately this really allows us to enable direct ownership of the program for industry and government. So as we said before, we really can't do this alone. So their expertise and their real world experience is something that is most certainly sort of our secret sauce to this program. It's been over 2 years now that we've been delivering the ARL program to all of APCO's members, and we have had outstanding uptake to date. We have over 350 organisations using the PrEP tool to assess the recyclability of their packaging, and over 220 organisations have signed up to apply the ARL on their packaging. So the uptake of this program yeah, really caught us off guard. It has been fantastic, and it just constantly keeps growing. And we really think that the fact that we have the largest retailers in our countries and also brands uptaking and using these tools and this program is really a credit to the program and its necessity at the moment in the market, that's for sure. So as quickly touched on the overview of the program, but as you can probably notice, the real unique characteristic about the ARL program is that it is so much more than just a non-pack label. The ARL is clear and transparent and consistent, and it is supported by the fact that it has that evidence base and it has a whole national consumer education campaign right there driving behind it as well. So we've seen firsthand where the ARL program has been driving these design changes from a brand perspective. So as we touched on before, the PrEP tool provides that feedback loop between what's actually happening in practice in the recycling system, and that's something that wasn't available before. So it really is that unique characteristic of the PrEP tool, is that brands can jump in there, find out this information really quickly and understand what the problems are so that they can in turn either change to a different material, or we've seen in some cases even where people just go, hey, hold on, we don't even maybe need this component anymore. So that's been a really integral part and a really big impact that we've seen from the PrEP and ARL program. And then in turn, obviously the correlating ARL on pack makes it really clear and simple for consumers to recycle right. And ultimately we're aiming to help reduce that contamination in that recycling stream at the moment as well. So the application of the label is really critical to the successful delivery of this behaviour change campaign, and we're really driving to improve that material recycling. The label is really actively recognised and supported by federal and state governments in Australia, and it's something that we're really looking to seek to develop that similar relationship and support here in New Zealand as well. We had a fantastic campaign running in National Recycling Week in Australia last year, which saw federal government help fund a out-of-home advertising, which for you guys who may know, that's quite an expensive campaign. So we were really surprised and grateful of all of that contribution. So it was really nice to see a program like the ARL up in lights on a big billboard across the east coast of Australia. So really looking to make sure that we can help continue to drive the uptake of the program and see those impacts that we've already seen so many of. And now I'll pass on to the lovely Anthony Peyton, the man himself, who is the founder of PrEP Design, as we mentioned before. He's going to talk you through a bit more of the specifics of PrEP itself and show you the magic live, I believe.
Thanks, Lily. Really appreciate that introduction. And tēnā koutou. What I'm going to do quickly is just let people know who helped me to get this set up in New Zealand. Marcus Braithwaite, Nick Baker, Des Fell, Sarah Pritchett, Paul Evans, Penny Garland, Kate Ellington, Sharon Humphries, Stuart Garbett, Graham Jones. Couldn't have done it without you, so thanks very much. So the PrEP is a tool that underpins the label. It simulates what happens to packaging after curbside. There's all the variations as we've had the introduction, but obviously goes in a truck, and sometimes in New Zealand we've got sorting on the back of the truck, and it goes to a sorting facility. During the setup, we went to the Auckland facility, and also Des Fell showed us around the facility at Wellington. Very different, more automated at Auckland, less automated at Wellington, but there's a lot of patterns there in terms of what is recovered in each of those facilities. Now, when it comes then to post that sorting facility, materials then will go somewhere else. It could go to a local paper mill, glass, but also it could be exported as well. So we consider all the factors at the subsequent stage of reprocessing of those materials. And importantly, if there's no markets for those materials at the end of life, and we've gone through a lot of changes over the last couple of years, then that's another reason why we might call something not recyclable. The PrEP is considering three elements. And this comes from what's called the ISO 14021 international standard that defines recyclability. Firstly, we have to make sure that there's readily available collection systems. Secondly, the item that we actually collect at curbside needs to be sorted positively at the sorting facility and can't cause any issues when it gets recovered with other materials. And thirdly, as I said before, there needs to be end markets. So if the item that we assess in the PrEP it fails any one of those three main areas, we call it not recyclable. Importantly, the PrEP is also built on parameters and thresholds rather than being based on a list of items such as cups or bottles and so on. An example of a parameter is how small is too small for a plastic item. An example of a threshold for that parameter is less than 50 millimeters in 3 dimensions. So that's an example of a test that we would have, but there could be a multiple series of tests conducted for each piece of packaging before we can actually comprehensively know whether it's recyclable or not. Now, importantly in this whole process of the PrEP, it's a dynamic tool. Lily mentioned the TAC. Now the TAC looks at the settings within the back of under the hood, and we adjust those in changing markets or changing technology. So it's not a dynamic. Dynamism is not a problem here because it can change as we go forward and respond to the changes in the market. Last slide before I go into the demo also, rather than having a binary assessment of recyclable or not, we look at this from the point of view of 3 layers. Is it technically recyclable? Or is it technically recyclable with lost value? Or is it not technically recyclable? Now, the midpoint is important because it's really it's possibly a transition stage where a brand owner is trying to make something more recyclable, but they won't get it recyclable maybe in the first instance. Another thing is that some things are more recyclable than others. So we're sort of drawing a line to give a chance for those to improve over time. And so when it comes then to the Australasian recycling label, if the assessment is either the first or the second, those items can be classified as recyclable to the consumer. So even though the second one is there with lost value, it's a feedback to the brand owner rather than necessary for the consumer to know about. Okay, so I think that's finished my slide deck. So what I'll do now is I'll just share my screen. All right, so here I am now. I've logged into the prep, and I'll just do a demonstration of a simple example of a bottle. So we've plugged in here, we've got a plastic. So we've got a plastic, and here we can select from what we've got here. So we've got a plastic bottle. What we'll do then is look at the parameters of the packaging. So for this bottle, we can select what the material is it's made from. So all the materials are covered that you would have in a packaging system were covered at curbside. A PET bottle, rigid, it's not a dark shade. So it's a series of questions here that we answer to really look at the parameters of all the packaging. Dimensions after it's crushed in a truck. Now down here, we've got the secondary material. So in this case, we've got a label that's made from PVC. It's shrink fit, so it might be laminated or glued, depending on how it's connected to the primary item, or depending on how it will behave with the recycling industry. So in this case, we've got the details of how much the label weighs as a relative weight of the overall item, but you've got sort of a situation there where you've got a design for a bottle that goes to the market. You then go to the report and it says it's not recyclable. Now further down here, it tells you why not. So even though PETs are widely accepted at curbside in New Zealand, we're calling it not technically recyclable because of plastics compatibility. PVC and PET don't like each other after they've been shredded into pieces and end up in the plastic recycling facility. That's the reason why we've got a problem there. So as a designer, we could go back and say, what about if we change this PVC to say a polypropylene? It might be a BOPP, for instance. Then we get a result, a different result. We've now got a result that's saying it's recyclable because we've now got a label that's better. One other variation might be if you have, for instance, that label is still the same label, but the area of the label now covers an area of 80%. Here's an example where the bottle is still recyclable, but you can see there lost value. And that's because the label is so large, it'll get sorted into the mixed plastic stream rather than the PET stream. One of the last point I'll show you that we launched last year, this is a dashboard of all your projects, which will be coming up shortly. So in terms of tracking your progress towards having all your packaging recyclable, this pie chart shows where you're at in terms of all your products. And also down here, you can pick a category and you can say, how are we going with soft drinks? Well, I've got one in there at the moment that's not doing too well. If you go into frozen foods, all your projects can be assessed and you can track your progress towards those targets. So that's the end of my presentation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Thanks, Meredith.
Great, thank you, Anthony. And there's a lot to cover with prep, and it is quite comprehensive. Lots of work goes into it. So we see some questions coming through. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to now share, we'll be talking a little bit about the ANZ Pack, and this was launched in March earlier this year. And we have the pleasure of having 2 different video presentations coming in from the UK. So bear with me here for just a second while I play these presentations, and then I'll hand over to Brooke to talk a little bit more about this afterwards.
Hello everyone, my name is Juliet Lennon and I'm part of the MacArthur Foundation's New Plastics Economy team. I hope you're all well, and I'm sorry that I cannot be with you today. I'm based in the UK, so the time difference is a little prohibitive, but I want to thank Brooke for giving me the opportunity to briefly speak to you. It is fantastic to know that key stakeholders in the New Zealand plastics value chain are coming together to explore the possibility of committing to ambitious 2025 targets to address plastic waste and pollution at its source. And we are delighted to support APCO in leading the development of an ANZPAC Plastics Pact to join the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Global Plastics Pact network. In doing so, Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island nations will be stepping forward as leaders, joining a growing number of countries around the world, including Chile, France, the Netherlands, Portugal, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the European Economic Area, all working towards a common vision for a plastic system without waste or pollution. It's increasingly visible that today our plastic system is broken. We take, make, waste, and as a result, millions of tons of plastic escape into the environment, end up in landfills, or are burnt, and billions of dollars of valuable material are being lost to the economy. Plastics are great materials, but unfortunately the system within which this material is used is still predominantly linear. We need a circular economy for plastic, where we eliminate the items we don't need, innovate so that everything we do need is reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and circulate all of that to keep it in the economy and out of the environment. At the global level, over 450 organisations, including many of you on the call today, are committed to and working towards this vision as part of the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment. And this is really important, but realising this ambitious vision will require unprecedented levels of collaboration and innovation, and not just globally, but also at national and regional level, as we work towards solutions that are tailored to each and every local context. And this is where the Plastics Pact Network comes in. It is a globally aligned response to plastic waste and pollution. It enables both vital knowledge sharing and coordinated action. Each pact in the network is led by a local, independent organisation. It brings together businesses, policymakers, and NGOs in the local plastics value chain to work towards a set of ambitious 2025 targets that are relevant to the local context. And progress made as a group towards those is publicly reported each year. This means an ANZPAC Plastics Pact would provide a central platform for public-private cross-value chain collaboration and industry-led innovation through shared ambition, combined expertise and collaboration to create solutions that are needed to address plastic waste and pollution at its source. And the actors will be demonstrating leadership in tackling this issue. So the ANZPAC Plastics Pact is set to join the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's growing global plastics pact network. This means that the ANZPAC Plastics Pact would not only provide a platform for collaboration between key stakeholders in Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island nations, but it would be able to collaborate with plastics pacts and key actors around the world, exchanging learnings and best practices, receiving the latest circular economy insights, analysis, and global updates, and importantly, success stories from ANZPAC would be amplified around the world for others to learn from, accelerating the progress made. We are delighted to be supporting APCO in leading the development of the ANZPAC Plastics Pact, and we encourage all of you to engage in co-shaping the development of the programme so it's relevant for your organisation and your local context, the challenges that you're facing, so that you'll be able to drive real action and real change towards a circular economy for plastic in your region. If you have any questions about anything that I've mentioned or any of the programmes, feel free to just drop me an email and I'd be happy to have a conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you to Juliet. We also have another presentation from David. I'll just pull this one up now.
Hello, and I hope you're all keeping well in these unusual and worrying times. It's been reassuring to me to see how many organisations are still dedicated to protecting our environment and tackling the global issue of plastic pollution. I'm David Rogers, Head of International Resource Management Programmes at WRAP. WRAP's mission is a world in which resources are used sustainably, and we're delighted to be working with APCO and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to develop the APCO agreement. Part of WRAP's work over the last 20 years has been focused on tackling the issue of plastic, and I'd like to take a few minutes of your time just to talk about the work we've done in the UK and the UK Plastics Pact and how that has become a model for tackling plastics around the world. Since the year 2000, we've worked with businesses and governments to create a circular economy in plastics. As part of this, we launched the UK Plastics Pact in April 2018. The UK Plastics Pact, developed in partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, doesn't demonise plastics, but aims to reduce the plastic which becomes waste and enters our environment. The membership of the UK Plastic Pact represents 85% of the plastic placed on the market, so that change can happen at scale. Targets are designed specifically to drive circularity by creating and feeding a demand for recycled content, and by eliminating problematic and unnecessary plastics. The Plastics Pact is built on WRAP's proven system change model, where everybody plays their role in a coordinated and collaborative way across government, business, waste management sector and citizens. In its first year, the UK Plastics Pact has had a dramatic impact, with businesses taking individual actions against the 4 target areas, which have seen 1 billion items of unnecessary plastic removed from the market completely. A shift away from non-recyclable black plastic, equivalent to removing 1.5 billion ready meal trays from the market, and removing 3,400 tonnes of plastic packaging from fresh produce, equivalent to 272 London buses. In addition, we've seen £100 million of investment in new recycling infrastructure, providing an additional 240,000 tonnes per year of capacity to meet demand. Our partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has allowed the development of pacts around the world based on the UK model. WRAP supports pacts in each country and is now running the European Plastic Pact, the first continental pact. This partnership continues to grow, as does the network of plastics pacts. We believe that APCO has a crucial role to play in this, and very much hope that business and government in New Zealand will support this agreement, as WRAP is doing. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, I'm very impressed with David and Juliet's use of technology, I must say. Brooke, I'll hand back over to you.
Thanks, Meredith. Essentially, where we are at this stage is in the development phase. We launched the APCO Plastics Pact development phase on March the 2nd here in Australia. We are looking to work with stakeholders in New Zealand and in the Pacific Islands on a collaborative way forward. We're doing that because we recognise one key thing: the plastics issue is a global problem. It doesn't stop at our shores, nor does it stop at yours, and we have to operate collaboratively in a global with a global lens to resolve this problem. There is, having worked in this space for a very long time, and particularly in the plastic space over the last couple of years, I'm very aware globally we all have a great deal of work to do. There is no clear leading organisation or country or geography which is just doing it so much better than everyone else. We all have a great deal of work to do, and the only way to achieve that and to accelerate that and to actually make that transition is to work together collaboratively. And we open ourselves to that collaboration and to that effort, and hope that you know, the people who can make that impact and that change in New Zealand and the Pacific Islands will also embrace the fact that we are part of one global world, and you know, we've all got the same issues and we need to work through them. And you know, that's what the Plastics Pact is about. It's about as a you know, those who live on this planet and are dependent upon its resources, we must find a way forward to these issues, and the best way we can do that is to work effectively together. And we are in the development phase. So to be clear, we are right now working through what the Plastics Pact, the ANZPAC Plastics Pact could be, what the targets will be, how it will operate. There are already some great ideas that have come through, a couple of workshops that have been done and some work that's been done. There's some very clear work to be done going forward in terms of developing the program, and so we need to work through what the targets would be, how it would operate, all those kind of things, and we are seeking the input of you know, New Zealand stakeholders, especially in helping to make that happen. And we hope that you will respond to the Plastics Pact expression of interest here, and that expression of interest is ask a couple of questions: what your interest is, what you feel that you could contribute, what your key areas of concern are, and that then opens you up to the communications around the Plastics Pact and how it's developing. We will have over the coming months opportunities for consultation and feedback, etc., and we would welcome that from, you know, various stakeholders in New Zealand. Also, in regard to the ARL program, there is also an expression of interest available for that. To be clear, what operates in Australia is similar in terms of the communication and the messaging, but the recyclability is slightly different in Australia and New Zealand. So that's why we have Australia and New Zealand represented on our technical advisory committee and our marketing advisory committee, because we need to reflect those differences, and those differences are reflected in the program. You know, there are some things that are recycled in Australia that are currently not recycled in New Zealand and vice versa. And so when you go into the prep tool, you have a choice to choose either Australia. You click on either Australia or New Zealand, because there are some variances that are captured because of the different systems that we have. And so, you know, we're very keen to understand the level of engagement or interest in the ARL program for New Zealand. We understand that within the Australian membership, there are a lot of businesses that also work in New Zealand, and this may be useful and valid for those businesses and organisations, and we would welcome your engagement in that expression of interest to understand how we could support and help with the delivery of that information and the program now that it's well established in Australia. The important thing about the ANZPAC program and the Plastics Pact network is to remember it is a network globally, and so much like the ARL program, Lily spoke to the fact that it's a collaboration between APCO, Prep Design and Planet Arc, providing the consumer education part of that program. The Plastics Pact is also a collaborative relationship between APCO, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and also RAP in the UK. And they've been delivering that program for 2 years in the UK now. So, you know, it's great to have working with some colleagues who can help us accelerate the work as well. But we, as you can see, there's two expressions of interest here. One for the ARL program and one for the Plastics Pact. Please do respond. They're not very complex. They're just a quick couple of questions to capture who you are and how we can contact you and what it is that you're interested in knowing. And we would love to engage with you more on that. But I'm quite certain that Meredith will have some questions for myself and for Kate and Anthony and Lily potentially. So go for it, Meredith.
Right, great, and thank you. Thanks to all the speakers, fantastic job. So maybe we'll start off with Kate. We've had a number of questions coming through around kind of the production and the manufacturing of the satchels, and I know a lot of that's available on the Better Packaging website. But Kate, specifically some questions came around your compostable satchels and if they're certified to any particular standards, and a few questions around how long does it take for those to decompose.
Great. So they absolutely are. They're certified to a number of international standards, the European standards, but most importantly for us, the Australasian standard, which is the AS 5810 for home compostability. And I say most important for us because it's the only standard in the world that includes a worm toxicity test. And, you know, we just like knowing that those little guys are happy with our packaging as well. And of course, it's particularly relevant for this part of the world. So in a home composting environment, the certification states that they will biodegrade within 180 days. Anecdotal testing by us and numerous customers suggest that it's more like three months or so for them to biodegrade into unrecognizable pieces, really. But no microplastics. Quite, explicit about that.
Yes, always very important. All right, we've got a lot of questions coming in around the labeling program, and one specifically coming in might be a good one for you, Lily. So how does one apply the ARL when selling products in both Australia and New Zealand?
That's a good one. As Brooke mentioned, sometimes there can be some differences. And as you would have seen quickly on Anthony's demonstration, as you do your prep evaluation, you're able to tick whether or not that product is sold in the Australian or the New Zealand market. And then as you saw at the end of the prep evaluation, you will get two different outputs. So if they are the same, you're able to just put one label on pack. However, if they are different, we do ask that they are stipulated in terms of which region you are stating that that's recyclable versus potentially not. To accompany the Australasian Recycling Label Program, we have a full user guide. It's a bit of a long one. It's very specific, and we have lots of visual examples about how to apply and not to apply. So yeah, we've got some standard sort of terminology that goes along with, say, using AUS versus NZ, which meets some standards in terms of making sure you're using the right naming conventions to make sure that your consumer knows which market you're referring to. So yeah, there aren't too many differences, but there are a couple of anomalies that we do ask that they are labelled specifically for those markets.
Great, thanks, Lily. And just to give a little plug there as well, we mentioned before, but Lily and Anthony will be leading a webinar later on in May around an in-depth prep assessment. So if you have any serious prep questions, definitely come along to that webinar as well. All right, we have a few more questions here around prep and how to use that. So that's a great place to check it out. Another question for Kate, so around, are your satchels manufactured locally? And are the materials ethically sourced?
Is this the compostable satchels or the swap packaging? Do you know, Meredith?
I think this would be the reusables, the swap satchels.
Right. So the material that we have decided meets all our criteria is absolutely ethically sourced. It's a fibre-based material, similar to paper, but it goes through a slightly different manufacturing process that uses a lot fewer resources than paper in terms of water consumption and power, and so it will be recyclable with paper at end of life as well.
Great, thank you. All right, and Brooke, one's come here for you. So Michael asks, Brooke, can you provide some insights on the role of individual countries within the UK and the EU pacts? Obviously, these pacts and pacts support collaboration and a common ambition for the region, but presumably each country has flexibility on design and delivery.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. When there's only the AMP development phase, when that was launched, that's the first regional approach. About a week later, Europe, there was a regional European Pact launched as well. And So that's the first time they've gone regional, but the way that we view it is that, of course, there will be differences between Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, more so the Pacific Islands than Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand will have some small differences, but largely be on page, whereas the Pacific Islands, obviously, you're talking about an entirely different type of supply chain, community use of packaging, that kind of thing, cultural issues as well. So you've got some of those more remote and regional issues to consider within the smaller islands as also. So it will be very important to understand if we want to have targets. Ideally, it would be great to have Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, and over time, get more consistency between those as we help support each other to move towards the overarching goals. But yeah, I would see, and part of the work that we need to do through this development phase is once we establish the appetite, if you like, for New Zealand to be part of the ANZPAC Plastics Pact, if there are enough stakeholders that are interested in coordinating that work and being part of that work, then a key part of that would be understanding what works for New Zealand, and that may be different and to what might work for Australia and what might work for the Pacific Islands.
Great, thank you, Brooke. And I think there'll be some more information around the Plastics Pact as that kind of comes throughout the year as well. We have some more questions here around the labelling program. So this might be one for you, Lily. So obviously the ARL is being used in New Zealand, but will there be any more work with New Zealand councils or maybe around consumer education for the ARL in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most definitely our plan is obviously to make sure that both regions are getting the same love and their consumers are getting the same attention as well. As we noted, we have Auckland Council involved in our technical advisory committee, so they are really closely involved in that one, as well as Wasteman's being involved in our marketing advisory committee. Wasteman's also, thank you very much, help collect all of our curbside access data, so that's a really great contribution to the program. And yes, our consumer education is looking to be rolled out. We're taking the same approach, however, that we did in Australia, and that is all about trying to get labels on pack first, so that we make sure that before we invest too much into too much education, as we know that's quite a costly exercise, we can get all those products on the shelves so that a consumer can walk down the aisle in lots of different stores and make sure they can see that, and making sure that that's constantly reinforced through all that messaging. Brooke, did you want to add anything else to that one?
Yeah, look, I think Lily makes a really good point, and it's a good lesson that we've learnt in Australia. Consumer education, as I mentioned earlier, there's two key elements to the program. One is educating industry to make the right choices and design packaging that is recyclable, and the second part is educating consumers about what the label means and how it works. You do end up with a little bit of the chicken and the egg situation, in the sense that you can't tell people to look for the label until the label is on products and packaging. So we need industry to step up and start labelling products. And what then happens is a very interactive program of education where we work with the brands to highlight those brands that are actually do have the packaging label on them, what that means, how they use them, and then the whole consumer education process rolls out from there. So it is a staged approach. As we said, it's referred to as a labelling program, but it's actually a consumer behaviour change program, which is a very big and complex piece of work, which means that things do need to happen in a certain order. They need to happen in a particular way to engage the right audiences with the right information that's accessible and available to them at that point in time. So getting over the technical part of the prep tool itself, then moving into the consumer education part, there are challenges in that in terms of making sure that we do have the visibility of the label on products, and that, to Lily's point, is key, is that brands are stepping up and starting to label their products so that we can then talk to consumers about the wonderful work that they're doing.
And I was just going to add to that if anyone does have any fantastic ideas, or you're a New Zealand brand that may already be using the ARL, we always love to hear from people. If you've got any ideas or any new products coming out, it's a part of our constant advertising of the ARL, and as Brooke said, all those brands that are doing really good work. So I'll put my email in the chat box. So yeah, if anyone has any thoughts or products, let us know.
Great, thanks, Lily. And there are a few questions coming in also, I guess, taking it back to the labeling program around determining the thresholds. So this might be one potentially for Anthony, if he's still on the line.
Certainly, Anne. Meredith?
If you can just elaborate a little bit more on that, Anthony, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so as I mentioned in my presentation, it's a parameter threshold tool. With the thresholds for New Zealand, that's when I spoke to people like Nick Baker at Busy and Des Fell at WM for the MRF thresholds, size of screens and things like that. Also at that time spoke to EnviroNZ and also the technology suppliers, so not just the company, but also who supplies the technologies to those MRFs. Downstream for the MRFs, you've got, I suppose, common practice in terms of, say, plastic. Plastic is an example where it's compatibility of plastics. You know, I gave the example of PVC and PET. They're both heavier than water, so they both sink. So when I talk about thresholds, we're talking about, I suppose, the physics associated with packaging design as well. But as also mentioned importantly, that all these thresholds for each of these parameters, the various tests that we have, are built into the back of the prep, and that's what the TAC looks after. So when the TAC monitors those, we can modify those over time, and if we need to make changes, we can do, and then notify the brand owners that a change is coming. Rather than just making a decision overnight, it's best to give them a heads up to say, this will be a change, it's going from not recyclable or recyclable to not recyclable. We'll make that change in 6 months type thing to give everybody a heads up.
I might just jump in there. Anthony was just a little bit patchy there on the audio, so I'm not sure. Hopefully mine might be a little clearer. Just to clarify a couple of things there, the thresholds are really important. I saw a couple of questions coming through the chat there around about, well, how do you deal with one council area to a different area? That is why we use the model of thresholds, because you actually need to work to that framework that allows you to be able to have a certain level of certainty that something is acceptable within the context of that threshold. So that's where it's really important. You know, the thresholds and the information that the data that is used to assess those thresholds, as Lily mentioned, you know, in New Zealand, Waste Mins helps us collect the data from local councils, and that goes into and is one of the sources of information, along with industry information and other publicly available information that we source, to be able to validate the data set that's required to meet those thresholds. It's a really interesting part of the work, and it's a really important part of the work about how do we actually give people confidence around the information flow. So thresholds are, and those thresholds, and this is a great thing about the ARL, it's a democratic process. So it's not Prep Design who, you know, determines what those thresholds are. It's actually the Technical Advisory Committee, which is represented by both Australian and New Zealand stakeholders. And it's actually that democratic process of going through, looking at the thresholds, looking at the data which is done annually as well. And then assessing whether those thresholds are still appropriate, whether we need to make changes to them, and all those kind of things. But it's very much a technical advisory committee's decision process. It's a democratic one, and it's one that has transparency and accountability to the broader supply chain, which is why, to Lily's earlier slide about the technical advisory committee, it's really important that we do have that representation from government, from the waste and recycling industry, from brands, and from other stakeholders, to make sure that everybody is represented and that there is a fair and transparent view of what those thresholds are and how that analysis is determined.
Great, thank you, Brooke. We'll take this one last question because it's come up a few times, just around soft plastic recycling in New Zealand. Red Cycle operates there. Thanks, Brooke.
Yeah. I think we have Lynn Mays on the line, which is great. And Lynn and her team are responsible for heading up the soft plastics program in New Zealand. Much like Australia, New Zealand has had its own challenges with soft plastics, a collection of them. And, you know, I was really pleased for Lynn and the team to see that they were able to restart the soft plastics program recently and continue to progress forward with that work. In Australia, we have the Red Cycle program, which some of you may be familiar with, and Lynn is working on the soft plastics program, and I know that she would welcome your engagement and questions or any inquiries you may have. Feel free to put them in the chat box. I know that Lynn is there. I'm sure she'll pick them up, or to forward them to us, and we will forward them on to Lynn. But we are working with Lynn and the team right now on what the ARL would look like. So one of the key differences between New Zealand and Australia in terms of the ARL is the ARL in Australia has both curbside and the Red Cycle program included in the prep tool, whereas New Zealand has curbside only. And we're working with Lynn and her team on what that would look like for soft plastics in New Zealand, and working through what those thresholds could be, and that's something that we'll continue to work on in the coming months. But it's an exciting new development that we hope to be able to provide that for the New Zealand program as well.
Great, thank you, Brooke. Did you want to close anything out this afternoon and just again say thank you to all of our fantastic speakers?
Yes, I would. I would like to say thank you to the wonderful Kate, the lovely Lily, and the fantastic Anthony. Thank you very much for your time and effort, and to Juliet and David, who provided us with the videos. You know, it's been a very full schedule. We may have been slightly ambitious with our number of slides, so lessons learned moving forward. But you know what, it's been wonderful to see so many people online and listening to the conversation and learning more about the work that's happening. And I think the most important thing that I'd like to convey for you all to take away is our organisation only exists to help industry and government really work towards reducing the negative impact of packaging on the environment, and we do that with a whole lot of strategic partners globally and here in Australia, and we welcome and embrace any stakeholders in New Zealand who would like to join our community and be part of that work, whether that's through the ARL program or through the ANZPAC Plastics Pact program. And even if you just want to have a conversation and understand with some people who might know or might be working through some of the same challenges as you, we welcome you and thank you for being here today, and look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brooke. So thank you again to all of the speakers and for all of you for joining us with your time today. We really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.